We should not be taking the system for granted as it is. Let me know your thoughts, 85058. Now, Russian diamond imports to the UK are among those to be banned by the British government, as announced by the Prime Minister at the G7 summit of developed nations over the weekend. The Russian diamond industry was worth £3.2 billion in exports in 2021. Big business for them, but what's the wider impact? Well, I caught up with Paul Zimnisky, who's a diamond industry analyst based in New York City, specialising in the global diamond supply chain, fortunately. And I spoke to him earlier, asked him whether it was possible to actually ban Russian diamond imports.
Yeah, it's not easy, and I think that's the challenging part. I think the objective right now is to build on the sanctions that the U.S. implemented in February, March, and April of last year. But I think the G7, via a collective effort, would like maybe a more technically tight approach. For instance, using the chemical makeup of a diamond to detect it through the supply chain. But I think we're still ways away from that. So it's probably going to be more of a system of warranties or a declarations approach.
So how are Russian diamonds imported at the moment, into the UK particularly, if you're aware of that?
I mean, it's going to be through the trade hubs. And I think, if there is a new round of sanctions, it's going to probably be implemented through customs. And it's going to be through some of, you need some kind of system of warranty or declaration in order to get the goods, through the countries. But again, this is the challenge because of the manual labor required to do this.
Yeah, and what kind of impact can this have on Russia? Because again, we're very familiar with the scale of income that Russia gets from its oil and gas production. And, the limitations on the sanctions there as well, and the impact of the sanctions. What about diamonds?
Yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, but we're talking probably a low single-digit percentage relative to what the oil and gas and energy industry is to Russia. So it's an important industry, but it's much, much smaller relative to oil and gas. And I think this is why the sanctions on the diamonds probably haven't been as much of a priority as energy has.
Right. And what do you make of the discussions at the G7 over the weekend and the approach to Russia financially?
I think it's clear that this is a serious objective. It's going to be more of a collective approach than we saw when it was basically just the U.S. last year. But I think, there are challenges on how to actually implement this in an effective way.
And one of the things that jumped out at me here, Paul, when looking at this story was how big a trade hub Antwerp is in Belgium. How can you put into scale sort of the importance to Belgium of this? And if they ended up being part of similar sanctions, what that might mean for the industry?
Yeah, Antwerp's a very important trade hub, especially for rough diamonds in the Western world. And again, the situation here is, I think, at least some representatives in Belgium see the concern being that if they stop importing, Russian diamonds, they're just going to go through other trade hubs and end up at the same end consumer markets anyway. So I think, again, the ideal situation here would be if you could essentially mark every diamond, so they could ultimately be, prevented from making it through, the Western consumer end markets.
Paul Zimnisky, there, diamond industry analyst based in New York City. Got Colleen McHugh here with me, Chief Investment Officer at Wealthify as well.